was having a conversation with an entrepreneur in Texas once. She owned a small cafe tucked away in a neighborhood near her home. And she had a great idea. She'd been surviving for a couple of years. She'd made it past the 3-year mark, the dreaded 3 years when most small businesses that don't make it tend to fail by. And she said, you know what? We live in a southern state. It's really nice. People like to eat and drink coffee outside. I'm going to put in some picnic tables in this small little pocket park lawn that I have. Great idea, right? Then she went to her city and said, hey, do I need any permits or anything like that? And she heard the 3 most terrifying words an entrepreneur can hear, in my opinion. Mandatory parking minimums. She was a small cafe. You could maybe sit 20 or 30 people in there. And so by adding a couple of picnic tables outside, she was technically launching herself into a new occupancy category, and she was going to have to basically double the size of her parking lot. Now, for anyone who owns a business, you know that just doubling the size of your parking lot is not really an option. That story luckily has a happy ending, but in this woman's situation, local policy was not working for entrepreneurs. Local policy was working directly against her desire and ability to grow and expand a meaningful business that was adding value to her life and the lives of her neighbors. So today I want to take a very simple roadmap. I want to talk about that problem when local policy doesn't work for entrepreneurs. But then I want to spend most of our time together today talking about the solution. How do we flip that script? And then I want to close with a reminder of why this matters in the first place, something that I think we all know by this point in the summit. Most of us have been saying some combination of these next 3 things for as long as we've been in the entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship ecosystem building world. Access to capital is hard. It's tough to find good commercial real estate these days. We have an affordability crisis there just like we do in housing. And it's constantly tough to make sure you're getting your business's name and image out there so people understand the products and the services that you offer. Those are the usual barriers to business that when folks like us get together and we talk about entrepreneurship, we're trying to solve and get across. But there's another problem in the policy world. What if on top of all the access to capital you need just to start up and get to day 1 of your business, you also have to deal with permit fee after permit fee and business licensing fees that can range in the thousands. Or you have to double the size of your parking lot and have a sudden renovation project you hadn't budgeted for. What if on top of just finding a space you can afford, your city's zoning code doesn't even allow for the kind of business location you need because you have an innovative, creative business model that no one has come up with before, and therefore it doesn't exist in the zoning code? And what if you get through all of those barriers, you're open, and you constantly watch people walk by your place of business because your city's sign code doesn't let others understand that you're there and you're open for business, waiting for them to walk in the door? Enter Cities Work. Cities Work is a project by the nonprofit Institute for Justice, where I'm lucky enough to work. We try to make it cheaper, faster, and simpler to start a business in cities across the country. Not necessarily through the grant-making process or mentorship or those other incredibly valuable services that ESOs are already providing in many communities, but by making sure that policy works for entrepreneurs. We combine important regulatory research to help entrepreneurs understand what the process actually looks like. Then we meet with, in roundtables and interviews, those entrepreneurs to understand their lived experience. For some, a $1,000 fee might not be a big deal if they were able to find capital. But finding the right real estate that's zoned for their business might be a deal breaker. And then finally, and just as importantly, we meet with the policy stakeholders, city officials who themselves are often frustrated that they have been unable to change the way the city's been doing business with businesses for decades. We combine all of that to regulatory reform, and then we help implement them to make it cheaper, faster, and simpler to start a business. What does that look like? It looks horrifying. This intentionally incomprehensible flowchart is what the process used to look like in Washington, D.C. to start a basic business. And for those of you that have started a business, I want to clarify that at the very end, if you can possibly read it, that's where you get to the part where you look at your specific business type. This is just the basic process before you even start looking at restaurant health inspections and specific business requirements. See, we had found that in working in Washington, D.C., which is a city in our own backyard across the river from Arlington, Virginia, entrepreneurs had been struggling with a cumbersome process for years. They had to deal with more than 100 different business license categories to try to figure out what they even needed to figure out on the paperwork side. And many of those licenses came with thousands of dollars in licensing fees on top of all of the other permit requirements. So we started by mapping out the process, which we quickly found no one in the city government had bothered to do. And we're the first ones to put together a flow chart that walked you step by step through the process. But that wasn't sufficient. And I'm pleased to say that as of this month, Washington, D.C. has fully implemented the BEST Act, which was a new law we worked with the mayor and the city council to draft and pass and fund that slashes those business licensing categories. It reduces business licensing fees from up to $3,000 or more to just a simple flat $99, 2-year, easy to renew fee. And it even has a carve out for the smallest businesses that make less than $10,000 in revenue, who no longer have to pay licensing fees at all. The point is cheaper, faster, and simpler so businesses don't have to make the city that they want to live and work in the enemy, but can instead get to day one in one piece. And that's the solution, but it can look different in every city. Not every city in the country needs a giant bill like Washington, D.C. did. We work in cities across the country with entrepreneurs, with ecosystem builders, to identify the specific needs that that city might have, and then try to implement a reform that matches them. I'll just share a couple of examples of what we're doing right now with our partners on the ground. Philadelphia is a great example. Like Washington, D.C., it's not probably the city that you first think of when you think, that's a place that's easy to do business. It's a large city, complicated, very old regulatory code, lots of ordinances to sift through to make sure that you're in compliance. But they're willing to work with us at least on one or two aspects. And right now, they're trying to streamline and uniform their health inspection checklist and process so that restaurant owners and health inspectors are on the same page. It seems like a small change, but it's vital if you're trying to stay open as a restaurant owner and avoid an unnecessary and unfair health safety inspection grade. We worked with Fort Worth, Texas, because their licensing portals and their online profile was some of the worst that we'd studied when we first got there. To their credit, the city recognized that and quickly worked to change it. And they're in the process of constantly innovating and making improvements to that website as we go. But it's already one of the better ones in the country compared to where it was just a few years ago. And I'm also happy to say that in Kansas City, Kansas, right in the heartland, we're seeing reforms implemented on a near constant basis at this point. They've just changed some of their mandatory minimum parking requirements. They've made positive changes to their sign codes, and they just allowed most home-based business types by right without a special use permit in the last couple of weeks. Those are all small when I say them like that, but they mean so much to entrepreneurs. And I know one of the biggest questions at this point is, does this stuff work or does it matter? And we've got examples. I won't go through everything that Chicago has done over the last 10 to 15 years, but during Mayor Rahm Emanuel's term in 2012 through 2018 or so, they did a lot of the things that we worked with Washington, D.C. to do. The takeaways there, even as the population was shrinking, the number of new businesses created went up. And most importantly, for those of you concerned about local budgets and seeing policy reforms get hit with, oh, that's just gonna cost too much, we can't afford to do that. There was a slight initial dip in their revenue from licensing fees they got. It bounced right back up along with increased business tax revenue because, shocking, when you make it easier to start a business, more people are able to start and grow those businesses. But this is why regulatory reform matters on top of all the other important things that we're talking about. We know that so many American entrepreneurs have the ideas and they have the capability to start their business, but so many are stopped by the regulatory process. They tell us that in roundtables, in survey after survey, and oftentimes policymakers feel helpless to do anything about it. And this is why it matters. Because that last page was a set of numbers, and these are the faces of people who, like you, are trying to change your communities and the country as a whole by reinvigorating entrepreneurship. It's not just creating a new job for yourself or for a couple of people. It's creating those vital third places that make a community really sing. They're what give a place like Augusta its very special local flavor and makes it different from any other city with the same population in the same general geographic climate. So we want to get to work with you. City's work is part of a nonprofit organization, and we're happy to do this kind of work for free everywhere we can, but we're a small team. So that means we rely on partners like you and the entrepreneurs that you also serve to find these opportunities. What cities need this kind of reform? What cities have the appetite for these kinds of changes? And where is the network in place ready to tackle these challenges? We're ready to get to work, and I hope you are too. Thank you very much.